Battle Through the Heavens, Grand World. Chapter 181. A true wily old fox. Kid, this is your first time coming to Black Sand Castle. When Xiao Yan arrived in front of him, the rugged-looking man looked at the handsome face of the former and said in a relaxed tone. Xiao Yan glanced at the 5 strong men in front of him. Each of them had a cynical smile on their faces. Judging from their behavior, they were old foxes who had been here for a long time. That's right, this is the first time. At this moment, Xiao Yan also had some leisure time, and he happily played with these people. Everyone exchanged glances and saw a trace of joy in each other's eyes. Sure enough, it was a young boy. This Black Sand Castle is not a place for kindness. Do you want to hear the rules here? The leader of the group smiled and said with an amiable expression. Xiao Yan's smile became even more humble. He looked at the brawny man in the lead and nodded in a hurry. Seeing Xiao Yan's appearance, the smile in the brawny man's eyes became even brighter. As if he was very satisfied with Xiao Yan's performance, he crossed his arms in front of his chest and spoke with an air of seniority. First, said the brawny man. Do not truly trust anyone. This is the foundation of your survival. Second, you can only hate him more than anyone else. Thirdly, understanding one's own abilities, there were some people. It's absolutely not to be messed with. As he spoke, the burly man had already walked behind Xiao Yan. A large and strong hand heavily landed on Xiao Yan's shoulder. He leaned closer to the latter's ear and softly said, "The last point, in this place, you must not let anyone see that you are a newcomer." The burly man's 5 fingers were already close to Xiao Yan's neck after his words sounded. He smiled and said, "Now, take out all the monarch crystals you have on you. Otherwise, I will let you climb into the Black Sand Castle." At the same time, the 4 unruly men standing in front of Xiao Yan gave a ferocious smile. They shook their heads, and the sound of bones colliding could be heard. The sound was extremely loud. Seeing the performance of these people, Xiao Yan, who had been maintaining his smile, suddenly laughed coldly. The smile on his face slowly increased. Then, he suddenly raised one hand and grabbed the rough middle-aged man's wrist. He shouted softly, and the strength of his entire body surged. In an instant, he threw the rough middle-aged man's back towards the 4 people in front of him. They were startled by Xiao Yan's sudden burst of power. While the 4 were in a daze, the rough middle-aged man was thrown over by Xiao Yan in shock and anger. His huge body continuously struggled in the air and rushed over like a huge rock. Dong! The 4 of them hurriedly caught the middle-aged man who was flying over. When they looked at Xiao Yan again, there was some fear in their eyes. With just one hand, they had thrown their captain away. This kind of ability was something that even some emperors did not possess. Brothers, the kid is too hard. Let's attack together. The rough-looking man who had been placed on the ground turned around and looked at Xiao Yan. He no longer looked down on Xiao Yan. His eyes began to reveal some fear and even more anger. This fellow had actually made him lose face in front of his subordinates. If he didn't regain his face, he wouldn't be able to continue living in Black Sand Castle. After hearing the rough man's words, the few of them looked at each other, then smiled ferociously. The trace of fear that they had just felt disappeared immediately. Without any explanation, they rushed towards Xiao Yan. This guy really has some ability. He actually threw the captain away with one hand. However, he was besieged by these guys who are even crazier than wolves. Even an emperor would not be able to escape without paying a price. He-san was lying on his stomach on top of the archery tower. When he saw the sudden outbreak of battle below, his heart felt hot. He held back the urge to continue fighting and looked at Xiao Yan, who was surrounded by a few people. He couldn't help but reveal a trace of a cold smile, as if he was looking at a dead man. Boom! Just as He-san's thoughts were about to end, a big man was sent flying backwards while screaming in pain. His huge body heavily crashed into the arrow tower, and he fell down powerlessly. His entire body trembled, and he continuously spat out blood from his mouth. His left arm had been dislocated, and his forehead was covered with sweat. He didn't even have the strength to stand up. Old Wu. When He-san saw the big man who had fallen down, he was immediately shocked. Although the former's strength was not considered top-notch, he had once followed the Lord to fight bandits and kill spirit beasts. Logically speaking, he should have rich combat experience. How could he be sent flying in an instant? Just as He San was shocked, another burly man flew out from the crowd surrounding Xiao Yan with a miserable cry. The enormous force caused him to crash into the barrier of black sand castle not far away. His head suffered a heavy blow, and the miserable cry of the burly man came to an abrupt stop. He directly fainted. What's going on? The moment they exchanged blows, they saw two of their team members being sent flying. The fury in the burly man's eyes instantly turned into fear. His raised fist froze in midair, and he forgot to swing it down for a moment. After sending the two burly men flying with a few punches, Xiao Yan snorted in his heart. These people were the most powerful among them. But it was an 8 monarch spirit warrior, and he didn't even need to use the monarch skill. He could easily deal with him with just his strong body alone. Xiao Yan, who had sent the two men flying, smiled and looked at the other 3 men who had dumbfounded expressions on their faces. He was just about to say something. Xiao Yan's brows twitched. Without any hesitation, he immediately dodged from where he stood. In the next moment, a long spear that was as tall as a man was thrust into the place where Xiao Yan had been standing just now. The sharp spear was hit by a huge force. It pierced deep into the hard soil, leaving only a few inches long wooden pole outside. Looking at the violently trembling spear at the tail, Xiao Yan frowned. If this thing hit him, even if he had a physical body that was comparable to an emperor, he would still be heavily injured. He looked up and saw He Sanjung flusteredly controlling the launcher on the arrow tower. He put another long spear on it and aimed at Xiao Yan with great effort. With vigilance, Xiao Yan naturally did not put this thing in his heart. He looked at the 3 people in front of him who were trembling in fear, especially the rough man who had introduced the rules of Black Sand Castle to him with a smile on his face. I know this kind of rule better than you. Besides the 3 rules you just mentioned, there is also another important rule, and that is, don't underestimate anyone. Even a beggar might be able to kill an expert in the next moment. As he spoke, Xiao Yan stretched out his hand and smiled while narrowing his eyes. Narrowing his eyes, he said, "Everyone, hand over all your storage rings." In Xiao Yan's subconscious mind, he still preferred this kind of chaotic place that was similar to the Black Corner region. This was because in this place, not only could he do whatever he wanted, he could also snatch other people's things without any scruples. Regardless of whether it was money or monarch skill, as long as one's strength was strong, he could forcefully snatch them over. Of course, if one wanted to make a name for themselves in this place, there was no guarantee that one would be strong enough to do so. Every minute, there was a possibility that he would be dead on the streets. When they saw Xiao Yan's smiling hand reaching over, their hearts trembled, and their intestines turned green with regret. If they knew this would happen, they wouldn't have provoked this evil god. Now that they hadn't eaten the fish yet, they had even provoked him. Swoosh! The sound of wind breaking rang out once again. Another spear shot out explosively, causing friction in the air, as if it was going to burn. Noisy! Xiao Yan let out a cold snort. His extended hand was instantly covered with red flames. He slightly leaned his body to the side, and the long spear had already brushed past Xiao Yan's shoulder and shot down. At the same time, Xiao Yan suddenly stretched out his hand. He steadily held the falling spear in his hand. After which, he looked at He San, who had a panicked expression on his face. The corner of his mouth revealed a trace of a smile as he forcefully tossed it. The spear changed direction and shot towards He San like a meteor chasing after the moon. The latter had no time to dodge at all. The sharp tip of the spear had already accurately brushed past his neck. A trace of blood quietly flowed out. Xiao Yan coldly looked at He San, who was almost paralyzed on the arrow tower. He smiled again and looked at the 3 people in front of him. He slowly stretched out his hand. "Give it to me." Chapter end. Hi guys, please like, comment, share, and subscribe.